Hey TV fans, Bored now back with you on this video. I will be talking about Yellowjackets Season 2 Episode 8. It is called It Chooses. Full spoilers from the start of this review, and it is the penultimate episode of the second season. Unless that bonus episode, which has been rumoured, ends up materialising, but I don't know at this stage if that's going to happen. So, very good episode, and it really sets up the end of the season nicely. In fact, the end of the episode and the way that whole thing plays out is one of the best endings to any Yellowjackets episodes to date. Very good episode for Natalie in this one. Big episode for Thaisa and also Van in both timelines. Lottie is recovering from the beatdown she suffered last time. It's not surprisingly then both Misty and Mari are like attending to her, and it's sort of funny how we see a different side to Mari in this episode, because she's the one who is like grossed out at like the graphic nature of Lottie's injury and just can't take the heat when it comes to looking after her. And her life is in the balance in this episode. Like, we know she's not going to die because she's in the present, but like that's the situation in the cabin. And Misty says, if you can't handle it, just go away, just do something else. So Misty takes over, and this episode once again does more to build up the kind of main players and who's on like different sides, like who's maybe on a team Lottie if we're going to continue down the path with factions in future episodes. But certainly for the time being, Misty taking a big role in team Lottie's side, which makes sense when we've seen like the whole thing with the Queen and the sacrifice. Lottie starts to have these flashes like we've seen Ben have. Flashes of the card, later flashes of the symbol, which becomes important and comes into play, and again of Shona like beating her. And Van's reaction to what happened last week is really interesting, because she really goes to bat for Lottie, and that's something we've seen build up over the course of this season, and you can see things coming together because she is once again one of the characters who we've seen in the future in the pit and involved in that whole ceremony. So the others are starting to talk about, well, what if Lottie dies? Is that such a bad thing? She could provide us with a bit of a meal, to use a dark term. So, but they're having that debate internal, like as a group, and they're debating whether it's such a bad thing. And I think part of that comes from this idea that some of them still don't trust her and still don't believe her, and some of them naturally are taking Shona's side in this whole thing. And Van's reaction is very interesting because she stands in the way and is very like powerful in saying, hey, Lottie did this for us, she took that punishment to save us all, really. So that's a really interesting way to look at it, and a really big character moment for Van. Speaking of Natalie, I also like the scene where she gives like the gloves to Javi, and that's a nice setup for later where Javi helps her as well. But it's a nice little gesture because he's still struggling from like his return from wherever he was, that place, so still trying to fit in once again. So that's good stuff. And we also have like an apology scene between Travis and Natalie in this episode, where he apologizes for trying to paint her as like a bad person, says you're not a bad person. They hold hands and reunite, and that's important for the end of the episode. A couple of nice smaller scenes for Thaisa as well in the wilderness. She finds out that Akira's mouse she's had and been talking to is in fact dead, which Akira hasn't really realised. Now, this is a bit random because like we've had a couple scenes before with this mouse Akira found it when she was looking for food a few episodes ago, didn't tell Mari about it, but like it's almost like it's not really a big deal because we haven't had that many scenes with it, and it doesn't really feel like they've done anything particular with the storyline, so that's probably a complaint. But show that she's kind of losing her mind a little bit, like other characters are, so I guess it's just another example of that. So it's not really a big deal, it's just the way they set it up a few episodes ago, I kind of expected it to be more of a big deal and for them to do a little bit more with it. I'm not sure what more they could have done with it, but that's just my feeling with it. But Tai is quite proactive in this episode because I love the scene of her getting the belt. Like, she finds a belt which was in Jackie's luggage and she gives it to Mari for like the soup, and there's a funny line about like Jackie's belt, it could be good for protein, which is just like fantastic. I love that scene, and once again it's them starting to think about that stuff a bit more practically, and it's certainly not a decision that maybe Shona would be in like a position to make. Misty starts talking to Lottie, who's like in and out of consciousness, tells Misty that if she dies, not to waste her, and it's basically saying, use my body, they can eat my flesh. So on the surface, like, that's a really bold thing for Lottie, and definitely over the course of this season I have started to see like more human sides to Lottie, and it turns out she's not as black and white as, like, not that she was like a nothing character, but just than her motivations and whether this is a person you can trust. It hasn't been as clear cut as it has appeared like earlier on. But again, this could be all of her plan. Like, this could be partly manipulation. Misty goes downstairs and says this, and this is where the group divides and starts debating about, like, would it be a bad thing if we ate Lottie and stuff like that, and they're talking about this. But again, when you see how the episode ends, you could sort of read it as like Lottie said that to Misty, and then that sets up what we see after that, and that's part of Lottie's plan. You could definitely read it one or two ways, but then it's really well done when we come back to them later and they start having the card game. Because when you come back to the cabin and they're doing this card game, when they're all picking a card and they're trying to select something, it doesn't let you know what's going on exactly, like why they're doing this card thing. But this brings it back around to the images we've seen of the cards like earlier in the season, like Lottie's cards particularly, which makes me think Lottie's could somehow be controlling all this. But yeah, it's just this clever scene where you see it play out naturally, and by the end of the scene you know what exactly is going on. But there's also some great good like horror direction in this episode and really tense scenes, because one scene I almost forgot to mention is then Taisha like sees the evil side of her like staring back at her in one scene where she like phases out, and that's a really good horror type scene also. But this card game and the way it slowly builds with them going around the different characters and like each character reacting when they don't have like the card which would seal their fate, so like the reaction of like Javi and Travis hugging is a nice moment. But yeah, it's just a really tense scene, especially since you're not quite sure what they're doing, and then it becomes clear at the end where Natalie gets like the Queen of Hearts, and yeah, her fate seems to be up, even though we know it can't be because she's in the adult timeline in the present. But she is so brave in this scene, so bold, where Shona is the one who's going to do it. Like, she's going to slit her throat, and she turns around to her and says, you're going to have to do it to my face. And it seems like Shona hesitates, but then she's about to do it. And how perfect is it that it's Travis who saves Natalie like puts himself in the way, like shoves Shona out the way and says run, and she runs, and the Smashing Pumpkins song Bullets for Butterfly Rings plays. Such a perfect like bit of music to use for this pursuit through the wilderness as the others chase after Natalie like a bunch of wild animals. There's only that way to describe it. Now at the same time, this correlates with Coach Ben, where he finds these coordinates, these markings, which he finds in Javi's stuff. And he starts looking into this, and he starts heading to where they direct him. And this is great correlation with the stuff going on here, because as Natalie runs for her life, Javi comes to her and says, I know a place you can go, like the others don't know about it. And he says, follow me. So he's starting to direct her to this place where she can be safe. And so it's a big moment for Javi, and even more of a heartbreaking like gut punch where we see what happens to him, because in all the commotion as he's trying to like get her away and show her this place, the others charge at them, and the ice starts to break, and Javi goes under, and Natalie does her best to save him, goes for him, but the others stop her, and Misty stops her, so that makes Misty a really big villain in this scene. But as Van says at the end of the scene, like almost in a trance like, but she has the great line, the wilderness shows. So suddenly it's like, even though Natalie tried to save him, like she tried to do the right thing, Misty cuts her off, and the others are there backing her up, and that's the way they see it. Then the wilderness has chosen that it has to be Javi, and like they're keeping the balance, and now because they drag him out from the ice cold water, and clearly he's gone. God knows what this is going to do to Travis. No surprise, him and Natalie have had friction in the present, but yeah, then it seems like they're now going to use him. We're going to get more cannibalism. So it's a little weird with Javi, because we only got him back like a few episodes ago, like earlier this season, and it was a big deal finding him, and I don't know if they've done as much as they could have done with him since returning. Like obviously the big thing is the reveal of like this other place, and there probably being others, and it's kind of served its purpose in that sense, because at the end of this one, also in the same part, Coach Ben does find the bunker, and he just starts going underground, and that may well save his bacon, because like in the next episode, in the finale, he might not have to be confronted with like cannibalism again, and he may well be safe from the others as a result of that. But that's interesting as well. I just think maybe it's a little bit of an anticlimax, than they got Javi back a few episodes ago, and then yeah, he's gone once again. It just feels a little bit like that, but it did serve a purpose. I think maybe you're just meant to accept that he's that sort of character. He's like more of a middle ground character. He's more of probably a MacGuffin in a way than like a really big character in the overall sense of the show. Like, I think they did the whole thing about Natalie and Travis trying to find him really well, and that was some great drama. It created some great drama between those two, but I'm not going to complain about this scene, because it is so well done. It's so well directed and so tense, and again, great bit of music, and once again it just puts these characters over the edge because of Van. Her line at the end of it, it's very compelling stuff. over to the adult timeline, and Vanessa kicks fucking ass in this episode because Shona comes back from getting the phone call from Jeff about the remains being found, that being Adam's remains. And I like the way she comes back and is like talking in code in front of Lottie and Van, because they're not filled in on the whole Adam thing, and like she's using the word friend, and they're trying to make it sound like it's like she's just lost a friend and that kind of thing. And it's an excuse for her to try and get out of there. But I like the fact that Van's not having any part of it. Like, she starts talking to, like, Thaisa, saying, what's going on here? This is fishy. This isn't right. And I love, as Shona's going to the car, Vanessa just ripping the keys from her hands and throwing it away. He says, no, we're staying here. You're going to tell us what is going on. And that's when she tells her the whole story about Adam and what went down. And this is a really great scene, like the way that this scene flows with them having this sit down, and because we find out about Misty killing Jessica Roberts, and Misty starts telling her about why she did that, and the others are like, yeah, you jumped the gun a little bit. She's like, well, I didn't know this at that point. And that's when it's revealed, and like she tells her about the scene with her and Walter on the boat, and then Walter was pretending to be an FBI agent to get like information out of, like, well, about the Adam thing from Randy. And that's when it's revealed to the others, like, very naturally. That's what's so good about this scene, is like it's all these connected dots that are brought together in a really organic way. It doesn't feel forced as well, but it's revealed to the others then it was Jeff who was like blackmailing them. Like the Randy stuff sort of leads them to that conclusion, and it's at that point where Shona's like the most honest in the episode. But it's a great scene, and it's a great example of what Yellowjackets does so well, because not only is it a very dramatic, like, engrossing scene, but it also has those touches of humour, like those, like, darker touches of humour where, like, Thaisa's reaction, like, with her head in her hands is really funny. But just the way they're reacting, but the ultimate irony of the scene, is then Shona actually comes out of the scene looking like a bigger villain than Misty. It's like in some ways they understand Misty's actions more, like with Jessica Roberts, than they do with Shona. They see Shona's action as being a lot more extreme and like over the top, and it's quite a cathartic moment for Shona, because she actually does confess that in recent weeks the way she's been acting with her family just hasn't been right, but the others are very critical of her. And speaking of Shona, just while we're there, you've got the brilliant scene with Jeff and with Callie, and the dream sequence with Jeff is really good. The nightmare he has about like Shona coming home in the middle of the night, and again it's another one of those scenes where you're like, well, Shona's back at the wilderness place, so what the hell's going on? And just her appearing to him with like almost like knives like on her hands, and yeah, just warning him not to lose his nerves, otherwise he'll end up like Adam. And like she just stabs him, and it's a really good horror moment, again, the way they get the blood splatter on the wall, and then Jeff wakes up out of it. But it's a great horror moment, a great freak out scene, but once again is in character for Jeff, because he is definitely starting understandably to have these kind of feelings about what's going on with my wife. Like, can I really feel safe around her? Is my daughter safe around her? So it's because of that nightmare, then he's up and Callie's up at the same time, so they do have a little chat, and that's when he tells Callie for the first time about his mother like losing the baby out in the wilderness, and just this really sad moment of Callie's like realizing, I would have had a brother. And that's something which is quite true to life, where often if you are an only child and you do maybe, like if you're a girl, you maybe wish you had like a brother. So that's just something that brings that home. But it's a really good scene, and it does feel like it plays out naturally, like it's a natural way that it comes about. And like you can see why Jeff would pick that moment to tell Callie. So it's just a little bit of context, like this is what your mother went through out in the wilderness. Like it's much more than you know. It's not just the Jackie stuff, it is this. So Callie does have a moment where it's like, oh shit, yeah, I can see now. But we get all this stuff going on with the group, and it's at this point where Shona's like breaking down and saying, yeah, I've done really terrible things. Then Lottie starts piping in and saying that we're all messed up, essentially, and we all need to start running away from the wilderness. Like we've or stop running away from the wilderness. We've all had this darkness inside of us, and it came back with us, and we now need to face it. And once again, it's very like debatable how much you think this is wise, but this is what leads to the end of the episode, where Lottie actually suggests, or the end of this like timeline in the episode, where Lottie suggests we try this poison game, almost like Russian roulette but with poison. And Misty of course knows that it's the poison that you associate with the Heaven Gates cult, because of course she would know something like that. But it links up really nicely from the wilderness too, because it's like the adult version of like the card game, and they're like, what are you thinking? But they actually seem to be considering it by the end of the episode, and it's like set in motion. So there's been talk of losing a big cast member like going into the finale, so maybe this is gonna lead to that, or maybe it's not gonna be that simple. I sort of have a feeling we might lose Taissa. I could see something like that, because that then would have a massive impact on Van, and would be really interesting to see the drama of that. But that's just my prediction for who it could be, outside of, like, if it happened to Walter, it's not surprising. Like, he's on his way to, or seemingly on his way to the wellness centre. During this episode, we see him getting more information online about the Adam stuff. A little bit of intrigue with that, but yeah, I think it could be Van. That's my prediction. I think that could lead to some big stakes and some interesting stuff, because we already know Vanessa has cancer anyway. But my hope is then Lauren Ambrose and Vanessa at least lasts into a little bit of next season. So let's see what happens with that. But really strong episode again. The pacing of this season has been just about spot on, where it's like hitting its peak in the last few episodes, and it's set up the finale really well, a bit like season 1 did. I think overall this season has been better, and that's just because the character stuff again has come on and grown, and like once again we've seen like even more impressive like stuff going on in the wilderness, and just like haunting moments and trippy stuff, and just some great questions that has been posed again. But it's once again it's like building to a really like fun finale. So let's see what they produce. I'll be back soon with the finale review. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media, and I'll see you guys again soon.